Good morning and welcome to another episode of The Hunt. We're back after a little bit of a break and kicking off the summer in a good way here with Brian Sedita. Brian, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. How's everything going?
Good morning, Kevin. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here and talk about this topic that we've been experiencing a bit of lately. And how about that summer smoke out there with the Canadian fire?
Yeah, a little bit better today. You have to mention it in every conversation that you have. We've realized that it is a requirement as of yesterday to make sure you're bringing that topic up. It's a great icebreaker. But
Exactly.
yeah, no, it's great to have you. And for those tuning in for the first time, this is a live show meant to help drive support in your recruiting efforts, whether you're hiring or looking for a new job. So use the comment box throughout the show, especially on this topic where I'm sure we're going to have some polarized opinions. Use the comment box, share where you're watching from, ask questions. We're only going to be on for about 10 plus minutes. We want to get to everyone's questions, and hopefully we can give you some good advice and guidance on a very important topic affecting a lot of people when going through the recruitment process. All right. So we'll kick it off. Brian, when you and I were talking and I was begging for you to do another show because of the rave reviews you got on your first appearance, you were very adamant about this topic. And I want to flip it to you first. When you didn't want to do anything else, this was the only topic you wanted to focus on. Why were you so set on making this something that you wanted to speak about?
Yeah. So, we're going to be talking about ghosting today. And it's something that we've been seeing happen a bit more frequently over the last couple of months. And I have to say, while it's not exclusive to this group, we've noticed it a lot in our early career candidates who, perhaps I could argue really need to take making professional connections a little more seriously and treat those relationships with nurture and care.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think we're talking today about ghosting when you're already involved in a process. So you want to ignore all those blind recruiter emails, ignore all those companies reaching out to you. We're not talking to you. We're talking to those of you out there who ultimately get involved in a process, are somewhat committed, and then decide to drop off the face of the earth. So Brian, something you're very passionate about. I know you've had some specific experience with, so hopefully you can help give some good insight. And I thought we'd start by talking about, from what you see as a recruiter and from what you gather, why do you think people have developed this habit of ghosting? Where do you think it stems from? Are people just kind of caring less about what other people think and just doing their own thing? Are people becoming more selfish? What do you think it stems from?
In some cases, I would say that, I would say that the minimal cases are probably those that just don't care. And that's truly just a character flaw, I would say. But I think for the most part, most people are just scared of what's going to happen if they decide to change their mind or decide that they no longer want to be involved in this process, or had a counteroffer with their current company. If they ghost at the offer stage, they're really just doing it out of fear of not knowing what's going to happen and fear of engaging and being upfront and really having those difficult conversations. Because I have to give it to people, it's not the easiest conversation to back out of a process or to give uncomfortable news to a company that's really excited about bringing you on board or excited about moving you forward to the next stage of a process. So I really just think most people are afraid and don't know how to handle it properly.
Yeah, I guess I could see that. I can only relate from a recruiter's perspective. And Denise, great point. Denise finds recruiters actually do most of the ghosting. And Denise, number one, if you have a recruiter that's consistently, after following up, hasn't responded to you, you're working with the wrong recruiter, and you should move on from them, which will be a topic that we'll get into here on the other side of the table. But secondly, from someone who has managed recruiters and built recruiting teams here, Brian, do you remember some of the most uncomfortable conversations you had to have? You probably, of anything you were fearful of, was having to call that candidate who you prepped a bunch of times, went on interviews, was dying for this job, and you had to call them and tell them they didn't get the job or you weren't getting them an interview. That was probably the same kind of situation. So there's a lot of recruiters out there, Denise, who struggle with this as well. You are absolutely right. So Brian, you think this really stems from more of a discomfort in dealing with confrontation?
But exactly. And I think that, just not to focus on it being only with early career candidates, but I think that's a reason why it happens for the most part with these early career candidates, because they don't know how to handle these topics and conversations and don't really have the experience to face what it is that they need to face.
Yeah, and from that standpoint, like ghosting kind of gets you off the hook, allows you to avoid any confrontation and move things forward without having that issue. And for those of you watching, if you have ghosted, don't be ashamed. Chime in as to the reason why and share. If you agree with Brian, is it more so just you don't want the confrontation? You know, this company's going to be disappointed, or the recruiter's going to really try to push you, or does it stem from something else? So use the comment box and chime in on that. So Brian, the people that are watching also are sitting there saying, I'm sure a lot of you out there are rolling your eyes like, yeah, I do want to ghost. I don't owe this company anything. I don't owe this recruiter anything. What's the worst that's going to really happen? Like, yes, clearly that recruiter's not going to want to work with me maybe, or maybe the company won't want to hire me anymore, but I'm willing to live with that. It's one company in the grand scheme of things. It's one recruiter. You know, I'll live with the consequences, not have to tell that person personally that I'm moving on. So change their minds. For those people that are sitting there thinking that, rolling their eyes at you right now, what's the worst that could possibly happen? Like,
so I'm going to first start with an analogy. I guess it reminds me of like online dating. You're going on dating apps and you're just swiping carelessly, just going through, right? You're just applying to ads on LinkedIn. You find somebody on Tinder, let's say, that you want to speak with. You start speaking with them, have a great conversation. You're going back and forth. Somebody initiates to make plans to meet up, and you just ghost them at that point. It kind of reminds me of this situation because in this case, you know, when somebody ghosts, you're obviously losing out on the immediate opportunity at hand, right? But when you ghosted, you probably, especially if you got to the end of the process, you met with their HR team, you met with their hiring manager, and anybody else that's going to be a part of the process, right? It could be 5, 6 people, could be as little as 2 people. And so at that point, everybody has your resume. They're probably showing your resume around the office, probably getting other people excited about your candidacy, saying, hey, we've got this great candidate in play for this new role. We're really excited about it. It seems like it's going well. Seems like they have interest. They keep moving forward to the next stage. And then if at any point you decide to ghost, the company at that point is thinking, what happened to them? So, and then there's probably people at that company asking, hey, what happened to that candidate? I thought everything was going well. When were they going to start? Especially if they were at the offer stage. And so now at this point, you didn't just ruin your chances with this one company. You ruined your chances essentially with each person. And if you treat it further, their careers are going to web off from that one company. And you're going to have lost your opportunity at ever working with any of those people if they recall your name.
Yeah, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, but my wife has steadily dragged me into Vanderpump Rules and the drama that's going on. Are you familiar with this, Brian? You've been paying attention to the
I have to say, I'm not up on the Vanderpump Rules culture.
So I'll fill you in later after the show. But essentially, this one couple, they're part of a very close-knit friends group. And one person decided to cheat on someone he had a serious relationship with someone else in the friend group. So looking 2 feet in front of his face, he probably realized it was not going to go well with his current girlfriend that he cheated on. What he didn't realize was any friend in that group, any friends of those friends, they're all discussing this. And in his close-knit community, probably everyone that knows him, all the neighbors that knew he was dating, and all that people that are asking, what happened with that? What ended up happening? What did you guys break up? What happened? He's going to have a tough time. He's probably going to have to move. So that's an amazing point by you that, like, those of you that are thinking about ghosting, especially for what Brian's going to describe in a second, of such an easy fix to avoid that, you're not just ghosting on one company. You're ghosting on the HR, the recruiter that was involved, the direct hiring manager, the team members you met with, and anybody else in concentric circles around that team who's going to be following up. Hey, what happened with Kevin? Like, you guys were so excited. Oh, we never heard back. We followed up multiple times. He disappeared. All of those people are now going to different companies, probably staying within a similar industry, probably staying within a similar function. And, that could come back to haunt you. Does it ever happen? I mean,
I was just going to say, I actually recall a situation that we had recently, and I'll go into that in a second, where it did come back to haunt somebody. So we were working with a stellar candidate that this was in the real estate industry. And it so happens that about a year and a half prior, this same candidate decided he was thinking about making a move. So they were in the middle of an interview process with one company. They got really far, had like 3 or 4 interviews, met all of the senior leadership, the team, and they got to the final stage, got an offer, even went as far as to accept the offer. And then about a week before they were set to start, HR was reaching out about, setting up first day details, firming up all that. And the candidate was nowhere to be found. They just completely dropped off the face of the earth. No text, no email, no call. And at first the company thought, this is really strange. This is so far from anything that, they would have never thought that this was the type of candidate that would just be ghosting them. So they were actually concerned. The CFO fell in love with this candidate, and she just didn't want to believe that they were ghosting. So turns out they did ghost. But so we didn't know this backstory when we started working with this candidate a couple months ago. And at the onset of working with them, we presented their resume to one of our clients, thought that they were a great candidate for this specific role. HR liked their resume. HR forwarded it to their CFO. And as it turns out, the CFO from that other company also made a move and was now at this new firm.
Wow.
Remembered as soon as she saw this candidate's resume, recognized the name, and of course the company that they were coming from. And, as much as she, would have loved to have worked with them a year and a half ago, at this point, she didn't want to go through that process again, no matter how much somebody could have changed, no matter, what the details were. It was really all a mystery. All she knew was this candidate ghosted and didn't have like the professional decency to just, face the facts and back out if they so wanted to. So they wouldn't consider this candidate for that opportunity. And, you might be thinking that's, again, just another one company. But like we said, it really webs out from anybody that you were involved in the process with. So it really is a good lesson. Unfortunate for that candidate, but I'm sure they'll, treat professional relationships in a different way moving forward.
That's unbelievable. So again, there's going to be a lot of people who are even hearing that story and probably sitting there saying, that's 1 in a million. But I think what you wanted to share today is how easy it is and how little effort it could take to just eliminate even the smallest possibility of risk. And before we get into that, Carly brought up a great point supporting another poster, Mary Lou. And they talked about a horrible company that treated people poorly and was brutal. Yeah, there's always an exception to the rule. Some places don't deserve your courtesy, but for the most part, we'd like to think that human nature kind of has some good qualities, and you want to treat people, with the golden rule. So very good points there. But Brian, even if this is 1 in a million, share what people can do without having to potentially open themselves up for confrontation, without having to overextend themselves, without having to make a lot of effort. What do you think those watching should do going forward if they have historically ghosted because of those reasons? What would your approach be going forward for them?
Yeah, so I couldn't think of easier ways of backing yourself out of a process in the digital age, right? You have emails and texts. You could even go as far as to set up templates in your emails and just have a template that you use when if you're really going on a ton of interviews and you want to back out of a couple of them, you could just have a template set up and you just plug in a couple key details to take yourself out of it. Keep it short and sweet. You don't have to really engage. You don't have to give too much reason behind it if you so choose. But I think just the minimal effort of dropping a line, whatever it is, just to let somebody know that you're not going to be moving forward is important. Think about the process that you're holding up for everybody else involved. I would also say that if you're working with a recruiter, you have that buffer between you and the company that you accepted an interview with or accepted an offer from.
Yeah.
And if you need to back out, that recruiter can be that buffer for you, so you don't have to have the difficult conversation with the client and see that upsetting reaction, right?
Yeah, and Carly loves your advice on the template. I think that's a genius idea, not to give you too much credit, but how many of you guys watching, I've been on this side of things, Brian, I don't know if you have in your job search because you fell in love with us right when you found us, and I don't know how much you look, but if you go through a process, how many of you go through a few interviews and then you get that email from the company saying, we thank you so much for your time. It was great meeting with you. Unfortunately, we've decided to go in a different direction. We would love to keep your resume on file for any future openings. Feel free to reach out anytime with any questions. Thank you so much for your time. They are sending that. That's a template that usually comes from their applicant tracking system. You're probably upset a little bit at the company because, you went through a few interviews and in the heat of the moment, it's like, oh man, but at least they let you know when the dust settles. And you're not going to hold a grudge against them for the rest of your life. Probably if another opportunity came up, do the same thing for yourself. Leave that door open with effort. That'll take you 5 seconds to click on a template in Gmail or whatever email program you use. And you never know how it could come back to haunt you. Brian, if anybody comes up with an excuse to not be able to take those 5 seconds, then I don't know what you could do to help there.
Yeah, and I think like it just takes away that bitter feeling that everybody has from not getting the closure and the frustration. And I bet both sides of the equation here can understand that feeling. And I think that that's really what we're encouraging people to think about is all the times that, maybe you felt the same way. It's important. Why would you just continue that cycle in your professional career if relationships are meaning to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And before we wrap up, Lauren, Musa, I hope I pronounced that correctly, and a few other people, I was worried this was going to happen, that we were going to get fired at about recruiters ghosting. Because I agree, we have to deal with this all the time. There's a stigma in our industry that we're guilty until proven innocent as recruiters in terms of the value that we add. And there are a lot of professionals in our field that ghost. So, Brian, what would you suggest, like when Lauren chimes in and Musa mentioning about how recruiters should be communicating more? Recruiters tend to ghost a lot. And Lauren specifically asks, what do you do if a recruiter completely ghosts you in the middle of a process?
Yeah, I mean, I guess firstly, it's important to clarify, like in the middle of the process, it's one thing to be getting cold emails from candidates, and same thing on the flip side. It's one thing to be getting cold emails from recruiters trying to reach out to you. So we're talking about people that have engaged with you, have started to build the foundation of a relationship. At least that's what we try to do here at Advice. And so when we're working with candidates, that's not acceptable to just ghost somebody on our side just because they're no longer going to be suitable for one of the roles that we're working on that we've had them in the middle of a process for. So I would first obviously try reaching out to the recruiter. You could also, take a look at other recruiters in their organization and see if there's a managing director that oversees their work. Reach out to that person, reach out to the office just to see if you can get a hold of them. You don't have to, put them on blast and explain the whole situation up front. Just see if you can get transferred over to them. And of course, if it's a really dire situation that you feel like you really feel like you're not sure what happened in the process, and it's been like a couple of days, you could try reaching out to the HR from the company that you interviewed with if you had that relationship or if you had any emails of anybody on calendar invites.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. Lauren, Musa, like if you're working with a recruiter who's not getting back to you, that's the point. Don't just sit there and wait. And if they don't actively reach out to you, you really start making crazy decisions. Try reaching out. Send them a message. Try calling. Brian, your point is great. Maybe try calling the main line of the company to get connected to them. If you try over a couple of days to actively get a hold of this recruiter and they do not respond and you're waiting on feedback from a company that you've interviewed with, met with, or been presented to, reach out to the company directly. And one of a few things happened. Number one, that company really just has not given any feedback. 2, they told the recruiter that you were no longer being considered and they didn't feel like relaying it to you. There could be a variety of things. Try a few times. You have to do that. You have to be true to yourself. Try reaching out a few times. If there is no response and you waited a few days and you're not even getting the recruiter saying, hey, hang on, we're waiting on feedback, go yourself. Reach directly out to that company And if a recruiter has historically ghosted you once, twice, was it fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, right? If you have a recruiter, no different than Brian, the story you just shared about the candidate that ghosted, and the second time around, they're like, I'm not going down that path again. Don't fall into the same trap. That same recruiter comes around a second, third time. They have a history of ghosting you every single time. Find out about that opportunity, and you have a recruiter that you trust more. It's not a great thing to do right off the bat. Take that opportunity to your other recruiter and say, I got approached by this. I don't want to work with that person. Can you see if you can get me in? If you're going to be treated in that way and be ghosted consistently with no feedback whatsoever, you have to find alternative methods and stop working with those individuals.
Absolutely.
All right? So, Brian, any closing thoughts about ghosting in general? I mean, it seems pretty simple, right? Get those email templates set up, send them out when you're no longer interested in an opportunity. You're covered. You left things on at least professional enough terms. It'll take 2 seconds. You're not dealing with confrontation. You're not going to have to get on the phone and explain yourself. You're not going to have to go make a presentation and put yourself in an uncomfortable situation. Hide behind the email, make it well written, save the template, and you avoid any potential risk of this coming back to haunt you.
I agree. It truly is that simple. It's comically simple.
Yeah, it really is. So, Brian, we appreciate your time. You had some unbelievable ideas based on the comments and people chiming in. It seems like they really got a lot of value out of this. And for those of you watching, if you have any questions, if you need help with your job search, particularly in administrative support or HR or any of those types of roles, reach out to Brian. He's tagged on this post. If there's ever any way we can help as an agency, specifically within the New York area, reach out to us anytime. And we thank you for tuning in. We hope everyone has a great rest of the week and weekend. We hope those in the Northeast stay healthy and that this smoke finally clears up. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks with another brand new episode of The Hunt. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for having me, Kevin.
All right, Brian. Take care.